Hey everyone, I want to talk to all of you who have trouble remembering names. Maybe it's a goal of yours to try and get better at remembering names. I think a lot of us struggle with this, but yet, ironically, a person's name is the single most important word in the English language to that person. It's the most important word. So when you meet a person and you remember their name, you cut through the clutter as somebody who really cares. And we've all met that person who, for whatever reason, like a week later we go back and they can still remember our name. And we're like, wow, we're blown away. It's very impressive. It stands out. It's something that you really notice. Even during a meeting, a lot of us, 3 minutes after we meet a person, you've forgotten the name. I'm that way. I don't know if you can relate, but I have to write it down if I'm going into a meeting and literally remember it myself. So I learned something this weekend over a podcast, modified it a little bit, and I'm serving it up to you in a way that you can remember. I have an acronym to help you remember how, or to give you a way to remember someone's name when you first meet them. You have to do this when you very first meet them. But if you can get in the habit of remembering these things, even just one of these 5 things, I've got 5 things I'm going to pass along. 5 letters, L-A-R-V-A, spells larva. I know, it's awful. It's an absolutely awful acronym, but it's funny. And because it's so funny and awful, maybe you'll remember it. Anyways, the acronym larva starts off with L. Okay, so L stands for listen. There is a huge problem in the world today of people not listening to other people. We have this inner dialogue, right? This the monologue going on inside our brains that we are so used to listening to that when we meet somebody new for the first time, a lot of times, we're still listening to ourselves. That little voice inside your head, those thoughts bouncing around, the color of the person's shirt, or what time is it, or do I have my notes if you're going into a meeting, or, what is that back there, or, oh yeah, and you're shaking someone's hand and they're telling you their name, but we're not listening because our brain is elsewhere. Ironically, you take the letters of the word listen and you retool them or reorder them and you get the word silent. Be silent. Silence your inner voice in your brain and truly listen when a person tells you their name. Okay, so that's the L. First of all, that's be present, listen. You could also add care to that. If you're caring about the person, you're truly listening. You're in that space. Okay. The first A is ask. Ask. Now, this is a very important step, especially if it's an odd name. There are some of those names where you're like, where did that come from? I'm not used to that. Maybe it's a name from a different culture. You've never heard it before. It's an odd or tricky spelling. A really great way to help you remember is to ask. So it's a natural curiosity when someone has a different name and you say, I've not heard that name before. Tell me a little bit about it. Is that a family name? Where does that name come from? Asking does 2 things. First of all, it shows the person that you're talking to that you're actually interested. By asking, you're doing something that very few, if any, ever do. And that is take the time to find out about the name. But the second thing, and you're kind of doing it for yourself, it'll help you remember, because if they give you this fun story, this interesting idea or something about their name, where it came from, help you increase the likelihood of you remembering the name. So ask about the name. Now, if it's just a plain name, if it's John or Joe, maybe you skip ask. Maybe there's something to ask about it. Maybe, there might be some question you can ask. But if it's any kind of a different name, you can certainly use that step. So R is the next one. The R is repeat. And that's important. When you very first meet the person, you want to repeat back the name as often as you can without sounding, annoying or obvious. So they say, my name is John. Oh, John, that's nice to meet you, John. Let's see. I know a John, or you can say John. Figure out a way to say the name 2 or 3 times as you're going back to them. If someone else comes by, hey, this is John. John, this is somebody. You see, I'm working that name in over and over. It just reinforces. That repetition is good. So the R in larva is repeat. So repeat back the name 2 or 3 or 4 times, as much as you can, without being weird. The next one, L-A-R-V. The V in larva is visualize. Okay? This is kind of a crazy one. But visualize the name somewhere. Like, see the name written in cursive or your favorite font. Maybe it's block or whatever. And maybe even visualize the name across the person's forehead. This is kind of a billboard for all of us right here. It's a little space. And if you're looking at somebody, you can visualize that name right there on their face. Now, why should that even matter? What's interesting about visualizing the name? Well, our brains are visual. We don't necessarily process words and spelling. We process pictures. Our brains are good at remembering. If you've ever heard people say things, and you probably said it yourself, I can remember your face, but I can't remember your name, right? We remember pictures. Our brains think and process in pictures, visually, okay? So anything you can do to create a visual for yourself, your brain is much more likely to remember it. So you see the word John in script, which you across, and you put it on their forehead, and you just kind of play around with that visual in the back of your mind while you're meeting that person. So you can visualize the name. And maybe there's a logo with the name. Maybe the name that already has some kind of, if the name starts with a K, and you think of the logo for Circle K, and that's the first letter, and then Kate, and so A-T-E. So you think of the K as a visual, because that's one that we already have. So those are some ideas, but visualize. Get good at learning to see a picture of their word, or even just one of the letters. The next one is L-A-R-V-A. The last letter in larva is associate. Associate their name with something you're already familiar with. So let's say their name is John. We'll go back to that example. You happen to have a cousin named John. Well, in your mind, you want to link the two. You can say, gosh, this person has the same color of hair as my cousin John, or he has the same number of kids, or he's about as tall as my cousin John. Or visualize, again, going back to that, this person you're talking to and your cousin with the same name as being best friends, or being brothers, or being twins, or something that connects the two. So you want to associate the person with somebody else, ideally with the same name. Now, this works really well for people with very common names. John, Joe, Bill, Ted, Ed, anything like that. Chances are you already know somebody that has that same name, and you can associate this new person with the person that you already know. So when you are asking, that's a tactic more for somebody who has a very different name, a unique name. And when you are associating, that's a tactic for somebody who has a very common name. So it kind of depends on who you're meeting and what the name is and all of that good stuff. So there's a tip for you to help you remember names. Just remember larva. So let's go over just one more time. Listen, repeat. Listen, ask. See, I had to write this down. I put it on my goal card. Listen, ask, repeat, visualize, associate. Use those steps. Any one of those will help tremendously. All of them will help phenomenally. And if you get good at remembering people's names, people will notice. That one thing I can tell you. I notice, and I'm sure you do, when someone remembers your name. It is such an amazing and valuable skill. And it puts you leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else, because nobody else can remember names. It's such a common problem. Everybody that I know doesn't remember names. and they'll say, oh, I'm not good at remembering names. You hear that all the time. And all we're doing when we say that, by the way, is just reinforcing that negative attribute that we don't like about ourselves, because we accept it and we tell people, that's how I am. And our brain goes, yep, and that's how you're going to keep being. So if you're bad at names, stop saying that. You can replace it with, I'm getting better at remembering names. It still suggests that you're not good at it, but it says it in a whole different way. I'm getting better at it. And start using these steps. Start caring, start paying attention, start listening, asking, associating, visualizing. I just totally messed up the order, but that's okay. You get the idea. Do those things and make it a habit. And if you mess up, if you meet somebody and 10 seconds later you're like, I didn't do any of those steps, that's okay. The fact is that you remembered right after. That's even better than not remembering at all. So you're making progress. And one day you'll start doing this as a habit, and you'll start getting it down where you're asking, visualizing, suggesting, and associating, and doing all these things the larva way. And pretty soon it'll become second nature to you. That's my tip for the day. I hope you make it a great day. Set amazing goals and go out there and achieve them. Use the 3x5 goal setting system, 3x5goals.com if you like, or comment below on what works for you, what doesn't work for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you remember names. And if I've missed something, or if I've misspoken, if you've got some better ideas, please comment below. Follow me on Facebook. Use the comments and throw out your ideas. I love to hear them all. Have an amazing day.